Hello there, everybody. It's just wonderful to be with you again and to share some of the really good things about God and how He works with us. And so tonight I'd like to share with you about the making of a champion. Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but I'd like to know what happens and how do you get to a Goliath when you're just a shepherd boy. And that's exactly what our hero tonight did. And that's David. Now, David didn't have a lot going for him as far as the immediate people that surrounded his life. Even his father didn't particularly recognize just who was living in his house, because he tried to get every other son into the kingship. But I tell you what, Samuel knew the difference, and he waited for the right son. And it was little old David who was out there with just his sling and had killed a lion and a bear, and he was so loyal to those sheep. And he was the next going to be the most famous king of Israel. But before he got there were some people that were really challenging Israel. And so David was chosen by his father to go up and to check in and see what was going on. And how's the battle going? And how are my boys? And they were already there, his brothers were, and they didn't have much really confidence in him either. So they said, what are you doing here? And who did you leave those few sheep with? And all of a sudden he heard a sound. And it was the sound of a loud voice on another mountain. And it was Goliath. And as soon as that came up, all of the men that were dressed for battle ran and hid themselves. And they were scared to pieces. And he just stood there indignant. Why is everybody running? They said, because of Goliath. And they said, we know you, and you just came up here to see the battle. No, he come up there to take on the battle, because there was another spirit in David. He had already been anointed, but I tell you, he had a lot of practice out there night after night as he began to write psalms and talk to God. But this particular time, he said, he was just strutting up and down and said, is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? What's the matter with you? We serve the God, the living God. And he said, you all run, and you're fearful. I am not afraid. I would go fight that giant. And so the brothers said, now, listen, Gola, we've had enough out of you, and you've got a prideful spirit. Now just be quiet and go on home. We know who you are. And so he said, well, I don't know what I've done to make you talk that way, but nevertheless, I will not stop talking. And when you can't quit talking about something, you're usually caught by it. And I tell you, he was caught by the fact that he was mighty through God, and he didn't understand why the rest of them weren't either, when there were causes at stake. So the next thing, somebody else heard him talking. You see, faith talk is something that's so contagious that somebody else catches on, and they hear it, and they said, I think the next level ought to hear this too. That's the way faith is. Faith is very contagious. You can catch it. And that's the way unbelief is too. You can catch unbelief. And then you have to make the choice. Well, all of Israel, and even the king himself, had chosen to run before the enemy. Well, all right. Somebody said, you know what? This kid needs to go before the king. He's saying some pretty grand things, and he just ought to hear him out. So they take him to the king. And the king says, what is this? You want to fight that giant? let me tell you what. He's been a warrior from his youth. He's fought so many battles, and who are you? You're just a child. You couldn't fight that giant. And he began to diminish who David was because the anointing was now off of him. King Saul had no more anointing. He couldn't ascertain. But yet, he stood there and said, I would, and I have a resume made of proof that I could do it. So he pulls out of his pocket the fact that he had killed a lion and a bear and what had happened out there with the sheep and everything, which probably caused the king to just smile at him. Finally he said, I guess you could. And probably he just thought, what have we got to lose anyway? So he let him go. And finally he takes off. And as he does, he says, wait a minute, put my armor on. And he said, I cannot put your armor. He tried, and he put it on, but it was dangling on the ground. And he said, I can't wear your armor because I've never proved this. I can only go with the things I've proved. And you know, that's so true of faith, that unless you have proven, and you have a resume of victory, you said, that works, that works, that works. And I feel like I've lived on the edge of risk all my life. And a lot of it was who I was married to, because he was a faith jumper. He believed that God was with him and that God would always see us through. Well, God did. And that's the way it was with David. So he gets what he's been practicing with. He picks up that sling, and then he runs down into the valley. Now there was a valley that separated Goliath and his army, and over on this side was the other army. Now David is right between them, and faith has to sometimes stand alone in the valley. Now the valley is where the water comes, and you know what? It makes the best stones, and he knew that. And you know, where do you find the best stones for your life? You find them in the valleys of your life. We don't really learn a lot on the mountaintops, but we learn an awful lot when we're in the valley. So by this time he has attracted the attention of Goliath, and Goliath is furious. Who is this upstart? Who's that kid? Wait, he was just like a bug to him. And he said, and he's coming to me with a stick in his hand. Well, he was so insulted and just belching out. He said, come on, I'll show you what I'll do to you. And he had all kinds of armor on. He was covered from head to foot except one place up here, and in his helmet didn't quite cover that. And there's always a vulnerable spot where we have to send our faith. You see it over and over. How the people won is because they found that one vulnerable space, and they used what worked for them. And you know, sometimes it was not ostentatious at all, and certainly wasn't with David, because here he is now, and he's running. He's on the run, and he takes just time enough to hear what the devil's saying. So anyway, he heard him out, and he said, well, you're coming to me with spears, and you got a man out in front of you that's supposed to protect you. And he said, the only thing I have, he said, I have a name, and this is what I'm going to do to you. Well, I tell you, it just angered him so much, and he was ready to just throw that javelin, and all of a sudden, David pulls back the sling, and he lets that stone go, and God directs it right to that vulnerable spot. You know, faith works. It works with what you practice with. And you need to practice faith every day when you get up, when you go to bed, when you go out to work, whatever you're doing, faith, faith, faith. So my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. Crown him Lord of all. See you next time. God bless you and have a wonderful day. And keep practicing with your sling because faith works. God bless.